Madam Secretary, you've referred to the QDDR a couple times as being important to diplomatic security. Is that correct?
It provoked a discussion, Congressman, about balancing of risk.
Madam Secretary, I had a chance to read that. I wanted to only read the executive summary that ran 25 pages, but it didn't have a word about diplomatic security in those entire 25 pages of the executive summary. Not one word, Madam Secretary. And then I read the remaining pages, amounted to 270 plus. Do you know how many pages of those 270 had to do with diplomatic security?
It was about the balancing of risk and reward, which
Madam
was
Secretary,
not only about diplomatic security specifically, but about the larger question of our mission around the world.
Madam Secretary, there was no balance. There was 2 pages out of 270 pages. You talked about a lot of things in there. You talked about a lot of improvements, but it didn't have anything to do with diplomatic security in any material way in that report. You talked about being disappointed, too. I've heard you use that several times. You were disappointed. You read the ARB. Why don't you fire someone? In Kansas, Madam Secretary, I get asked constantly, why has no one been held accountable? How come not a single person lost a single paycheck connected to the fact that we had the first ambassador killed since 1979? How come no one has been held accountable to date?
Well, Congressman, the Accountability Review Board pointed out several people working in the State Department who they thought had not carried out their responsibilities adequately, but they said that they could not find a breach of duty. And
yes, ma'am,
the personnel rules and the laws that govern those decisions were followed very carefully.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not asking what the ARB did. I'm asking what you did.
I followed the law, Congressman.
So
that was my responsibility.
Madam Secretary, you're telling me that you had no authority to take anyone's paycheck to cause anyone to be fired. You're telling me you were legally prohibited from doing that. Is that your position here this morning?
It is my position that in the absence of finding dereliction or breach of duty, there could not be immediate action taken, but there was a process that was immediately instituted and which led to decisions being made.
Yes, ma'am. The decision was to put these back at full back pay and keep them on as employees. That was the decision that was made as a result of the processes that you put in place. I will tell you, the folks in Kansas don't think that is accountability. I want to do some math with you. Could I get the first chart, please? Do you know how many security requests there were in the first quarter of 2012?
For everyone or for Benghazi?
I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. Related to Benghazi and Libya. Do you know how many there were?
No, I do not know.
Ma'am, there were just over 100 plus. In the second quarter, do you know how many there were?
No, I do not.
Ma'am, there were 172-ish. Might have been 171 or 173. That's how many were there in July and August, and then in that week and a few days before the attacks? Do you know?
There were a number of them. I know that.
Yes, ma'am. 83 by our count. That's over 600 requests. You've testified here this morning that you had none of those reach your desk. Is that correct also?
That's correct.
Madam Secretary, Mr. Blumenthal wrote you 150 emails. It appears from the testimony or the materials that we've read that all of those reached your desk. Can you tell us why security requests from your professionals, the men that you just testified, and with which I agree are incredibly professional, incredibly capable people, trained in the art of keeping us all safe, none of those made it to you, but a man who was a friend of yours, who'd never been to Libya, didn't know much about it, at least that's his testimony, didn't know much about it. Every one of those reports that he sent on to you that had to do with situations on the ground in Libya, those made it to your desk. You asked for more of them. You read them. You corresponded with him. And yet the folks that worked for you didn't have the same courtesy.
Well, Congressman, as you're aware, he's a friend of mine. He sent me information he thought might be of interest. Some of it was, some of it wasn't. Some of it I forwarded to be followed up on. The professionals and experts who reviewed it found some of it useful, some of it not. He had no official position in the government, and he was not at all my advisor on Libya. He was a friend who sent me information that he thought might be in some way helpful.
Madam Secretary, I have lots of friends. They send me things. I've never had somebody send me a couple of pieces of intelligence with the level of detail that Mr. Blumenthal sent me every week. That's friend?
Well, it was information that had been shared with him that he forwarded on. And as someone who got the vast majority of the information that I acted on from official channels, I read a lot of articles that brought new ideas to my attention, and occasionally people, including him and others, would give me ideas. They all went into the same process to be evaluated.
Yes, ma'am. I will tell you that the record that we've received today does not reflect that. It simply doesn't. We've read the emails. We've read everything that we could get our hands on. It's taken us a long time to get it, but I will tell you, you just described all of this other information that you relied upon, and it doesn't comport with the record that this committee has been able to establish today. And I want you to take a look at this chart to the left. You'll see the increasing number of requests, over 600. I think data matters. The pictures are worth a lot. You see the increase in the requests, and then the bottom line is the increase in security. And you'll note that the slope of those two lines is very different. Can you account for why that is? Why we have an increase in requests and yet no increase in security?
Well, Congressman, I can only tell you that I know a number of requests were fulfilled and some were not. But from my perspective, again, these were handled by the people that were assigned the task of evaluating them. And, you know, I think it's important to, again, reiterate that although there were problems and deficiencies discovered by the Accountability Review Board, the general approach to have security professionals handle security requests, I think, still stands.
Yes, ma'am. I wish you to listen to those security professionals. You described Mr. Stevens as having the best knowledge of Libya of anyone. Your words this morning. And yet, when he asked for increased security, he didn't get it. The second chart. It's the same thing. I just talked to you about requests for additional assistance. This chart goes through. I won't go through the numbers in detail. We've talked about them a bit, but it shows the increasing number of security incidents at the facility, your facility, State Department facility in Benghazi, Libya. And then again, it shows the increase in security being non-existent. I assume your answer is the same with respect to the fact that we have increasing security incidents, but no corresponding increase in the amount of security?
Congressman, I just have to respectfully disagree. Many security requests were fulfilled. We'd be happy to get that information for the record. Yes. So I can't really tell what it is you're putting on that poster, but I know that a number of the security requests were fulfilled for Benghazi.
Yes, what it shows is that the number of direct diplomatic security agents at the beginning of 2012 and those that were there the day of the murder of 4 Americans is no different.
Congressman, the decision, as I recall, was that the Post, namely Embassy Tripoli, on behalf of Benghazi, requested 5 diplomatic security personnel, and they did have that on the day that Chris Stevens was in Benghazi. Unfortunately, that proved insufficient in the face of the kind of attack that they were facing.
May I put the next poster up, please? Madam Secretary, you're not likely to know who these 2 folks are, do you?
I do not.
The one on the left is Mohammed al-Zahawi. He was the head of Ansar al-Sharia, a jihadist group based in Benghazi. The man on your left is Wissam bin Hamid. Were you aware that your folks in Benghazi, Libya, met with that man within 48 hours before the attack?
I know nothing about any meeting with him.
On September 11th, on the day that he was killed, Ambassador Stevens sent a cable to the State Department talking about with Mr. bin Hamid. Are you aware of that cable?
No, I'm not.
He said in his cable, he said they, referring to Mr. Wissam bin Hamid, they wanted an introductory meeting. They were here. They asked us what we needed to bring security to Benghazi. So your officials were meeting with this man on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, discussing security 2 days before that. But in August of that same year, the United States government had said that this very man was, quote, a young rebel leader who allegedly fought in Iraq under the flag of al-Qaeda. Were you aware that our folks were either wittingly or unwittingly meeting with al-Qaeda on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, just hours before the attack?
I know nothing about this, Congressman.
So your officials were meeting with this man on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, discussing security 2 days before that. But in August of that same year, the United States government had said that this very man was, quote, a young rebel leader who allegedly fought in Iraq under the flag of al-Qaeda. Were you aware that our folks were either wittingly or unwittingly meeting with al-Qaeda on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, just hours before the attack?
I know nothing about this, Congressman.
I think that's deeply disturbing. I think the fact that your team was meeting with
I'm
folks...
sorry, which team is this, Mr.
Yeah, it would have been... We don't know exactly who...
Well, it would be
held the meeting
helpful...
with him. It would have been one of your State Department employees, Madam Secretary. I don't know which one. Perhaps you could enlighten us, or we can get the records we need to do so.
Well,
to date, we've not been able to learn that.
Well, since we didn't have an ongoing department personnel in Benghazi, I don't know to whom you are referring.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
What difference at this point does it make